You guys are all turning there. I'm the only one who's not. Oh, Angela's not. All right, Genesis chapter 1. All right, so to start with, Genesis means the beginning. That's what the word translates to. So, Sean, you're about my age. You remember the video game system, the Sega Genesis, because it was the first Sega game system. So it was the beginning one. All right, so this book, and particularly this opening section here, this chapter and the next one, are the most controversial in all of the Bible. Tradition and historical evidence support that the book was recorded by Moses, though as a largely oral culture, these accounts were handed down from generation to generation, word for word, before that. So let us not discount the Holy Spirit's inspiration as a part of the process in the creation of the book as well. So what I'm saying is we can trust it even if we know it was written down a large period later. All right, so Genesis chapter 1. Somebody read verses 1 through 2, please.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters.
All right, so a common question people have is, where did God come from? The answer is, he did not come from anywhere. He was there before the beginning. God's presence is not argued here in Genesis. It is simply understood. God is. God is there. It is implicit. The word implicit shouldn't be there. That's a typo on my word. That's where I was trying to figure out a better way to phrase that. So you can just cross that out for later. All right, so to start with, God created heaven and earth. At this point, no description is given, nor of anything of its creation. It seems that God created it instantly, along with the angels, though that is not stated here. Instead, as heaven is almost dismissed at this point, God spent time intimately creating our universe and our world in particular. It is also noteworthy that all parts of the Trinity are present at this time. God the Father is there in approval. The Holy Spirit is hovering over the waters, but it is Jesus who does the creating. Don't miss that point. And I put in references there to John 1 and Colossians 1 for further study. You can look those up. But both of those chapters state implicitly that it is Jesus himself who does the creating. All right, so that is not to be missed. All right, somebody read verses 3 through 5, please.
And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that light was good, and he separated light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, the first day.
All right, so the first piece of creation is light. Before that, everything was dark. It says void, darkness. As darkness is the absence of light. The light at this point has no source. Think about that. Light has no source at this point. It just is. Still, the light and the darkness were separated. The light is day and the darkness is light. And God looked at what he created and he called it good. At this point, a poetic refrain begins. There was evening and there was morning, the end of a day. This leads to some competing theories that makes this passage so controversial. The first is known as Theistic Evolution. Simply put, people who hold this theory believe that this is poetry and that God is trying to explain to people that lack understanding what happened, whereas God actually used what we know as the theory of evolution to create the world. Still, these people believe that God was actively involved in the process of creation. Don't miss that. Those that are called theistic evolutionists still believe God was involved in the process. And I've mentioned this before when we've talked about creation versus evolution. Charles Darwin, who's known as the father of modern atheism, was in fact a church-going Christian who wrote in The Origin of the Species that the process of evolution is so impossible that it is only possible through the direct intervention of an all-powerful God. All right? Known as the father of modern atheism, but he had that much faith in God at least. So the second theory is known as old earth creation, and those who hold to that believe that the length of time is symbolic, that each day is an age representing perhaps hundreds of thousands of years. Now, there are some people on our staff who hold to the old earth creation theory. So I say that to say there are plenty of very intelligent people. Some people dismiss that as your faith is weak or anything like that, but I mean, some of our own ministers hold to that. So what I'm saying is we don't need to judge other people based on what they believe as far as how to interpret that. The third theory is known as the young earth creation, which is what I hold to. Those that hold to this theory point to the mention of morning and evening, which point to a literal day. Whatever belief you hold, the important thing is to remember that the account is about the God who did the creating, not the creation. Okay? Don't miss that. And that's one of those things that, like, we shouldn't judge our brothers and sisters based on which of these three theories that they hold to. Even if I very strongly and passionately will defend young earth creationism, I also don't dismiss those who disagree. Yes, Sam.
Okay. Now I'm confused.
All right.
Down here where you said whatever belief you hold, the most important thing is remember that this account is about the God who did the creating.
Right.
Not the creation. Okay. But Jesus did the
Yeah. So you have this.
Jesus does the creating.
Right. So because Jesus is God, he is, God the Son,
Okay.
that part of the Trinity. So the whole Trinity is here, but it's God the Son in action.
Okay.
And just to clarify, in John 1, it starts out by describing Jesus, and the term it uses for him before he became a person and received a human name was it describes him as the Word.
Okay.
And so the Word is the spoken word that's doing the creating here,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
I got you. All right.
You got it?
Yeah, got it.
All right. So, yeah. All right, somebody read verses 6 through 8, please.
And God said, let there be an expanse between the waters to separate water from water. So God made the expanse and separated the water under the expanse from the water above it. And it was so. God called the expanse sky, and there was evening, and there was morning, the second day.
All right, so the second day included the making of sky, which would include the atmosphere, right down to the layers that protect the earth from harmful solar radiation and cosmic projectiles. Mom got a movie called Deep Impact on TV the other day. And, it's asteroid's going to destroy the Earth. Some guys blow up the asteroid. And then it shows all these, chunks of asteroid raining down through our atmosphere and being burned up. Of course, it's the reason our solar system has things like an asteroid belt and Jupiter and Saturn and these giants is they actually will deflect large objects like that from our world. Even Mars and our moon will help move things around us to where anything that's big enough to harm us in that way gets absorbed or deflected or just changes course. So it's very, very interesting thing. But we do have a layer of moisture at the top of our atmosphere that protects us. So several of you guys mentioned you like your favorite outdoor as hunting, or maybe if you go hiking, you've done an early morning hike, you've gone out camping, something like that. So it is literally coldest at dawn. You ever notice that? Like, it'll drop several degrees when the sun breaks. So my college roommate asked a meteorologist why that happens. And he said that with the water that's like even above our clouds, when it's cold, it will actually like freeze and make frost, just like we get on the grass, on the top of the atmosphere. And as the sun bakes it off, it actually releases some of the heat as that like frosty layer burns off. So that's why it literally will drop, because that has held in some of our heat. So that'll drop off right before the sun starts heating up what's in the atmosphere. It's very, very strange. I've never checked it out independently, but that's what he told us. So pretty cool to think of like these layers of moisture. You also have fresh water, you have salt water, but you also have all these different clouds and moisture layers and everything like that in our atmosphere.
Question was sure when it said the water above and water below. I was like, I was confused, but they answered that question.
Yeah, clouds. Yeah. Someone read verses 9 through 13. In fact, we've seen today some of that moisture going from up to down.
And God said, "Let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let the ground appear." And it was so. God called the dry ground land, and the gathered waters he called seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, "Let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants and trees on the land that bear fruit with seed in it, according to their various kinds." And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seed according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with seed in it according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the third day.
All right, so the third day includes the making of dry ground and plants. It is remarkable to imagine mountains, plains, deserts simply rising out of the water, then sprouting every known plant into the world, simply because God said so. God called it good, and another day ended. I also want to point out, if you've never read the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis wrote some of his most in-depth theological works as children's stories. And in Magician's Nephew, a couple of these kids that include the professor that they go to in line in which the wardrobe, he's one of the little kids in the first one, or in the Magician's Nephew. But he describes Jesus doing the creating only how C.S. Lewis imagined it. Instead of God saying, "Let there be light," he sung it. That's how C.S. Lewis imagines it, that it is a creation song. And he talks about like the sun dawning for the first time, and mountains rising up, plants just coming into being, and everything like that. And he describes it as the kids are watching this gigantic lion sing, and all this stuff comes into being. So very, very interesting thing. Somebody read 14 through 19, please.
Then God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth." And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, and the lesser light to govern the night. He made the stars also. And God placed them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, and to govern the day and the night, and to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, a fourth day.
All right, so in the fourth day, God creates the sun, moon, and stars. Again, this passage gives a controversy to those who do not hold to the young earth theory, pointing out how long it takes for light to travel from a star to the earth. 90 billion light years, you hear that, is like our closest star. that means it takes 90 billion years for light to travel from that star to where we can see it visibly on the Earth. It takes 90 billion years of light moving at that speed to get there. But on day 4, we have this going on. What did we already have on day 1? Light created. So it seems plausible that God, who can create something out of nothing, can also create a light that fills the empty space between the stars and the earth. I have no problem believing that God not only created this star here, but he went shh and drew the light. I have no problem with believing that whatsoever. That's, I can see where they come to on that point, but, not saying I dismiss it, but that doesn't create a challenge to me, if that makes sense. Now the light that had been called day has its source, which we called the sun. And God called it good, and another day ended. Before I move on, we're halfway through creation. Any questions?
So on day 2, the light was just lightless. It wasn't the sun or the moon.
Yeah, it
just
describes
was
it like, like just a light coming in from nothing, but it still has a division to where on the globe, which was, just water at that point, it's still the light shines on half of it and not on the other half. To where you still have that day and night. But yeah, it's not until this point that he says, it's almost like God says, okay, they need something to understand light. So we're going to put a big fireball in the sky and see if they can understand that. And no, we still don't. We only have theories. Yeah, it's a little weird to think about. We don't understand it. It's not how things work in our world. The light doesn't come on, then you flick the switch and the light bulb comes on. That's not how it works. But that just shows the power of God.
Because God is light.
Yep, because God is light. One other thing before we move on, I hope you don't mind me calling you out. Linda asked me last week about, over the phone, about the Bible will sometimes mention there being heavens, and here it used the word heavens plural, that he sung the moon and the stars and the sun in the heavens plural. All right, so the Bible does talk about their a belief in there being 3 heavens, but it gives them 3 distinct locations. So the first heaven is basically our blue sky. It's inside our atmosphere. It's where airplanes go. Okay? That's the first heaven. The second heaven is the heaven we just talked about here. It's where the sun and the moon and the stars hang. It's everything outside of our atmosphere. But beyond that, you have the third heaven, which is what we would know as heaven with a capital H. It's where God has his throne. So the third heaven is what we would simply call heaven. But, they're one and the same. But that's where it gets confusing. Kind of like a day is made up of a day and a night. Think about that. A day is made up of a day and a night. But it's both. A day can be the period of sun, and it can also be 24 hours on a clock. So, in the same way you have, the third heaven and capital H heaven. All right.
So the Mormons that believe you can be back, that there's levels of heaven you can be?
Well, I know that the Gnostics believe that, and I think the Mormons believe that to some degree. And so do Jehovah's Witnesses, believe that there are layers and like a bumping system. The Mormons believe that there's that there's one heaven that's what we would hold to, but that's not the real good heaven. That, we'll go and we'll hang out with God, but if you're a good Mormon, then you become God over your own planet to act in your own creation. But you are doomed to make the same mistakes that God did. That you will make the mistake of creating sinful beings in your own image, and that you will have to live with the consequences of having to kill your son on a cross.
Don't they also believe that you can be baptized for somebody that's already dead? Give them
Yes, Mormons believe that you can be baptized in the name of someone who's already dead and get them out of hell and into like our heaven. Not theirs, I don't think.
So the better heaven, according to them, is your own planet
Yeah,
where you screw up.
The better heaven to them, yeah. But you're a god,
Well,
and you'll have your own heaven to rule. But again, you ever
that
think
would be
about
heaven,
our
that'd be
God
like
as
work and you're running-
doomed and making mistakes? That's not the God I know. And we'll get to that in 2 weeks, that God had a plan that wasn't mistakes. All right, someone read verses 20 through 23, please.
And God said, let the water teem with living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the expanse of the sky. So God created the great creatures of the sea, and every living and moving thing with which the waters teem, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the waters in the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, the fifth day.
All right, so in the 5th day, God creates the water animals and birds. I specifically said water animals because it seems to imply that dolphins and whales were also included in that, I think.
Hope so, because what's coming up?
Yeah, so you know, I think it includes all sea creatures, not just fish by the technical definition.
The little water,
It's
Um,
water.
and the little water snakes too.
God gave the creatures, like the plants, the ability to multiply, and he blessed them in another day. I also always thought it was interesting that evolutionists, in their belief of how the species evolved and how different things evolved, follow the order of creation. That you had plants, and then you had fish and birds, and then like mammals come along last. I always found that very interesting, that the people who don't believe in the Bible will still follow the Bible's order of operations. Just food for thought. All right, somebody read 24 through 31, please.
God said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, livestock, creatures that move along the ground, wild animals, each according to its kind. And it was so. And God made the wild animals according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that moved along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, let us make man in our image, in our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over the livestock, over the earth, and over the creatures that move along the ground. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, created them. And God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth, subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. And then God said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it, and they will be yours for your food. How am I supposed to go?
331.
And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds of the air, and the creatures that move on the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food. And it was so. And God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the 6th day.
All right, so on the 6th day, God created the animals that walk the earth. So, what's your favorite day of the creation story? 6? Mom likes it because they made her cats and dogs and horses.
I was about to think that too, because I love animals. But I like that we have sun, like day and night, because we need to have that.
So day 1 or day 4?
Day 4.
Day 4. I think day 4 because the stars and everything.
Which I don't mind the stars and all that, because I still like too, but I just like that because you can sleep better when it's dark outside.
Well, but you have that at day 1. You have the light and the darkness separated. Angela, Sean, favorite day? 6? Same reason as Mom?
Because it is like, I mean, it's always beautiful, but then you've got everything on that point. Trees, flowers. You could have left those out. Ticks.
There you go.
Flies. Flies.
Little sweaty things or
Yes.
whatever.
No, I could have just taken care of that one swap.
John, how about you? Your favorite day?
Of course, we didn't eat then. We didn't bite then.
I think 5th. I like the water, the sea animals. Unless I go to Florida, I do a lot of snorkeling. And it's just something about being there. Just all the schools of fish are just swimming around me. It's just Panama City.
Yeah, I would probably go with you two, who said day 4, with the sun and the stars and the moon, because that's, in some ways, it's like that's the most colossal of creations, especially when you compare the scope of size of here's the earth and here's the sun, you know. All right, so among all these creatures, he made one unique, and that is mankind. The term image is similar to what will later be translated as idols. So those of you who are familiar with a more, let's say, traditional translation of the 10 Commandments, now commandment number 2 is don't make yourselves a graven image, or a carved idol, would be maybe how we would say it these days. Same word. We're made in God's image. Don't make yourselves a graven image. And he's like, you don't need to. I already made you one. I don't need a physical representation on the earth. That's what I made you for. So man was made as God's physical representation on the earth. What made us unique among the creatures is that other creatures are made as physical beings. Angels are made as spiritual creatures. Humans are the only thing in all of creation that is both physical and spiritual. You ever think about it that way? Now, it does say that animals here contain the breath of life. That's what I would translate as the soul. But we also have spirit, and that's what separates us from the animals. They don't have spirits, but we do. So that's what makes us like the angels, except we're also different. As his representatives, God ordered humans to rule over the earth, to care for it on his behalf. We are his stewards or managers, caring for his earth. So I'm going to pick on Angela because she's here and just got off work. You don't own KFC, but you manage it. That's what we are. We don't own the earth, but we manage it. So I don't believe, I'll tell you straight up, I don't believe in global warming. It's complete made up garbage because people can make money off of it. But that doesn't change how I treat the earth. I don't therefore go trash the earth because we're managers. We're to take care of it and treat it like it's not ours, but that we're taking care of it for somebody who's much more important. God also created us with differences to reflect aspects of his character. So that's one of the reasons you see in our culture the attempt to destroy genders and to make up the 54 other genders. Last count I knew, there were 54 more other than male and female. And then I saw a hilarious thing that somebody is selling t-shirts that say like something like genders are constructs, meaning like we made them up, there's not really any differences, but the t-shirts are sold in male and female. Wait a second, I thought you said there is no difference, but you sell the t-shirts in different sizes based on whether the person is a male or a female. Something seems to be missing here. But those differences are good. You know, if you grew up with good parents, you know that there are times when you're hurt, who you go running to? Mom. You need your mom when you're hurting. You know, somebody kiss your boo-boo. Dad kisses your boo-boo, it doesn't help. Only mom has that magic. But if you also grew up with a good dad, if there's a scary noise in the house, who do you want to go check it out? Yeah, you want dad. Those differences aren't made to imply that one is better than the other, and we'll dive into that more over the next couple weeks. They're just, but in total, when both are working properly, are both reflecting aspects of God's character, that he shares all of those good aspects. So God then, for the first time, calls it very good. Very was not as overused as it is today. So the significance of this to close out the 6th day should not be missed. Every day, creation's good, creation's good, creation's good, creation's good. Day 6, creation's very good. All right, every time the Bible says very, it's important. So that's what you have here. And then let me point out, I've often said that chapter and verse markings are not inspired. They were created by men to help make it easier for people to find where they're looking for, but they're not always all that good. A perfect example, right here, the very first chapter, it cuts off 3 verses that should have been on the first chapter, and it puts them on the front of chapter 2. So somebody read verses 1 through 3 of chapter 2, please.
Thus the heavens of the earth and the host of them were finished. And on the 7th day God ended his work which he had done. He had rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made.
All right, so so this passage is where the tradition of the week comes from, as well as having Saturday as a day off from work. God will later command the Israelites to honor the 7th day as a Sabbath. See Exodus 20, 10 Commandments. That's where the tradition of Saturday as a day off comes from. So because of that, let me say this. There are people who will say, well, you need to go to church on Sundays because it's a Sabbath. No, it's not. Sabbath is on Saturday. Sunday is the first day of the week. We go on the first day of the week because it was on the first day of the week that Jesus rose from the grave. So Sabbath, Saturday is different from Sunday. So you hear somebody say that, go, that's not right. All right. Sean, if you want to go ahead and kill the video.